Good evening, members. Welcome to tonight's CEP meeting. I hope everyone's had a good week so far. I'm just going to start by reading out the fire evacuation procedure and a few other notices. So there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the side of this room. Exit through reception and meet in the War Memorial Park. Just a reminder that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. And just to confirm, thank you. A reminder that members and officers, that in order to be heard clearly within the room by those present and on the webcast, that you must speak directly into your microphone. The microphone stem itself can be moved so that it is as close to your mouth as possible. And please make sure that your phones are either switched off or turned on to silent, please. Thank you. So, on to the main agenda then. Absences and apologies and any substitutions. Councillor Miller is being replaced by, or for, Councillor Carr. Is there any other substitutions or apologies from any of the groups? No? Thank you. Any declarations of interest this evening? No. And any urgent matters that any member would like to raise? Excellent. So, minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of January. Are the committee agreed that the minutes of this meeting held on the 17th of January are an accurate record of that meeting? If we just agree? Agreed. Yep. I'll sign those afterwards. At some point. Okay, so main item then, the informing community safety priorities for 2024-25. We have got visiting guest here rank eludes me, Inspector Jim Gallimore. Thank you, sorry, I should have picked up on that beforehand. And also the Cabinet member will be introducing the report. So over to Councillor Mackay to introduce the report, please.
Right, thank you, Chair. Before I read through the foreword, let me just thank the officers in advance who are about to give us a presentation and for putting the report together and for the work that they do all year round. So neighbourhoods where residents feel safe and want to live is key to creating and maintaining healthy, strong communities throughout our borough. This includes ensuring our residents, businesses and visitors feel safe in our retail and commercial areas. We know and understand the detrimental impact that crime and antisocial behaviour can have on individuals and communities. In fact, the phrase that always comes to my mind when talking about antisocial behaviour is corrosive effect. And I think that sort of sums up the importance and the negative impact that ASB in particular can have. So as a council, we won't tolerate antisocial behaviour, and we consider a range of tools and powers which are available to us and working with our other agencies to support resolving issues. The council continues to prioritise and focus on issues which matter most to residents. Residents frequently tell us that living in safe communities which are resilient to crime and antisocial behaviour are important factors to them when it comes to living in this borough. The Council has continued to invest and commit to investing in local services which best support and empower a safer community across Basingstoke and Deane. These valuable services directly contribute to our Council priorities. So this evening I'm keen to hear views from members all around the committee to help us develop and influence future mechanisms for involving elected members in identifying issues of crime and antisocial behaviour which are having the most impact in their local areas. I'd like to encourage member involvement in supporting local communities and the response to community safety issues in the years ahead. Thank you, Chair. I'll hand over now to officers.
Thanks, Councillor Mackay. Just to introduce the report, so for those who don't know me, Dan White, Safe Communities Manager, Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council. Just want to say as well, thanks to Inspector Jim Gallimore for joining us this evening as well. So whilst I'm presenting the report on behalf of the Council services in relation to antisocial behaviour and crime, the work of the Safe Communities team, Inspector Gallimore's come along from a policing perspective, because we know from previous committee meetings of this nature that it's been really useful for members in the past to be able to have them questions directly answered, which may relate to police. And we work very closely in partnership on a daily basis and on a strategic level as well. So hopefully that will add value to tonight's meeting. Just to give an overview of the report, and yeah, I've mentioned around the partnership work which we do, and this will link in with some of the work and some of the what's in the contents of the report as well, particularly relating to the activity of the Safe Communities team over the past year, and as well looking ahead at the future. So for awareness, our Safe Communities team at Basingstoke and Dean consists of our community safety team, which is led by Debbie Mason, and our community safety patrol officers as well. We also have public space surveillance with our town centre surveillance cameras, and have some responsibilities as well as the rest of the organisation with safeguarding. As I say, hopefully you've had a chance to have a look and read through the report already, so I won't go into too much detail about its contents, but I just wanted to spend a little bit of time to provide an introduction to that and provide a bit of an overview of some of the contents in there and pick out on a few points as well. So the report considers, has got some information which you'll see, which hopefully is useful in relation to crime and antisocial behaviour data. So the data which we use is taken from our strategic assessment, but as a bit of a caveat, so that covers the previous crime reporting year. So that would cover the 2022-23 year. So obviously being at the end of or nearing the end of the current financial year, that's obviously why it may seem slightly behind, but that's the last full year set of data we have. I have included in the report some other data sets as well, just to provide a bit more contents on a more up-to-date level, particularly around some of our work with the team and what they've been doing over the past year as well. So hopefully that just gives a bit of a flavour, as well as the overarching crime disorder data, but also some data relating to some of the more recent activity which has happened. The report looks at the current community safety partnership priorities. So for awareness, we have a Safe North Hampshire strategic community safety partnership, and our community safety partnership covers the Basingstoke, Hart and Rushmore areas. So we work very closely with our partners in all three areas, as well as the statutory agencies which make up the community safety partnership. And that's in relation to taking a partnership approach to reducing crime disorder. I will point out as well that we do have a crime disorder overview and scrutiny committee, which discharges our duty under the Crime Disorder Act as well. So the partnership activity is reviewed there, and I think our next meeting is planned for June, I think. So that's an annual meeting which takes place to look at the partnership activity across the CSP area. So just to give a bit of a flavour of some of the priorities which we work towards. So obviously as a council, we have our own priorities in relation to what the council's priorities are and residents' priorities. But we also are working towards meeting our community safety partnership priorities as well. So they include domestic abuse, improving feelings of safety, serious violence and antisocial behaviour as well. So them priorities are from a data and evidence led, and they come about from the community safety partnership strategic assessment, which is done on an annual basis and reviewed every 6 months. I think probably important just to mention as well, each statutory partner has its own measures which also contribute towards priorities. And we obviously review them, and I think it's around us and what our approach as a council is, and hopefully this report gives a little bit of a flavour around what we do as a council in relation to meeting them priorities, as well as the council's priorities as well. With that, I think section 4 of the report includes some a fair amount of information in relation to some of the work which has taken place over the past year to help to meet them priorities and just to demonstrate some of the work of the team and what's gone on. And then I think that leads into some of the things which we know about already and what's planned. So really, I think that probably kind of summarises where we are with the report. I think what we are looking for tonight, and to build on what Councillor Mackay has already said, is for us as a team, it's really important, whilst we've got them partnership connections, that working with local ward members and you as community leaders is vitally important to the work which we do. Communities play a significant have a significant influence in helping to reduce crime disorder, and we know that involving and engaging local communities in the response to community safety makes a real difference as well. So that's obviously vitally important for us. So one of the ways, obviously, which we do that as a council is that link in with elected members. And I think part of this committee meeting tonight is around how we can further build on that. And I think there's already been some really good and positive work which has taken place. We had the recent member training which took place, which is hopefully useful. It's how we can build on that, and if there's anything else which we can consider to involve ward members and be able to seek that information intelligence at a real local level to help shape them future local community safety priorities, and how we can best keep members informed going forward with the work of the team. So that probably, hopefully, Councillor Lee, that provides a bit of a summary of the report, and yeah, probably don't need to go into any further detail in relation to what's in there, but welcome any questions from the committee.
Thank you very much, Dan. Useful insights. I will kind of set the tone, I guess, for how I'm hoping tonight will go. Just a reminder that views are sought on the key community safety issues that we as members have heard from our communities within the last year, so that they can help set the priorities for the teams, and also which topics elected members would find useful to cover in any future briefing to support their role in tackling antisocial behaviour within their wards. I'm very conscious that we have got the inspector here. What I am hoping we don't have is individual cases of how we can sort out a problem that's in a particular ward. What I'm looking for is to group it into themes of issues that are ongoing so that we can talk about those. If you have got individual cases that you want to raise, please go through Dan, Debbie, the relevant teams to get those sorted. We can't as a committee resolve those here tonight. So it is just about the themes that have come up throughout the year within your wards. I'm going to use my position as chair to actually start with the first question to Jim. We've had a lot of problems over the last year with the unauthorised car meets and the roads being used as a racetrack, essentially. Can you kind of guide us into what sort of planning as we head into summer months when this is likely to pick up again? What sort of planning the police are doing to combat that going forward, please?
Good evening, everybody. So car meets are not just a Basingstoke thing, although you have got a town that does lend itself to car meets when you compare it to other places. Absolutely right, yeah, with your dual carriageway all the way around it. So this is tackled at a force level, and we are well aware that we are displacing it from one place to another quite a lot. Sergeant Pete Scammell is one of my sergeants who is leading on this. We've put it under the banner of Chromium, and he's got one of his police officers who deals with a lot of this and links in nearly daily, I think, with you, Debbie, doesn't she? We've been tackling this from a number of different directions. We've been using the Roast Policing Unit to come into this because we believe that there's a two-stranded approach, which is engagement with those who are meeting and doing it nicely, calmly, have got a practice, a love of cars that they wish to indulge in, and then going after those with a vengeance who drive disrespectfully, dangerously, those kind of things. So With regards to what's been happening recently, when we've had reports to us, and I must encourage people to report it to us, because sometimes we're finding that actually we find out about them because my officers are innovative and they monitor things like Spotted in Basingstoke, but actually it's a much better response if people call it in through the 999 system and it gets deployed that way rather than self-deploying. Is that we have a look at what's there, and then we call in other units. We've used drones recently to evidence antisocial driving. With those powers then under the Road Traffic Act, once we've identified vehicles that we can go about identifying the drivers, we can then look to prosecute them if we believe that that's the right way and we've got the evidence to support that. So we are absolutely cognizant of the impact that it has. It is very noisy. It has the capability of being very dangerous and the impact of that on the community, and therefore, you know, we are here to help and to try and displace it. We've done lots. I say we. Debbie and Pete and Andy White, my police constable, have been working incredibly hard with local businesses with regards to trying to make the car parks harder to get into and those kind of things, isn't it? Debbie, have you got a bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just to kind of expand on a bit of what Jim's saying, we've done lots of work over the past probably about 18 months now around all the different sites in the area. So we know that we had lots of big car parks, for example, Sainsbury's, the Hatchbourne Retail Park, where Lidl's is, and places like that. So we've done work with those owners to do various things. So Sainsbury's got AMPR in there now, and speed bumps. The Lidl's car park, they closed their gates now, so that's kind of taken away the issue. Morrison's again closed their gates. So we've kind of been moving around. Asda's have done some great work with speed bumps in there, and there's more work to be done there. So there's things like that, as well as, like Jim's saying, the media stuff around report things, but also the good news about when things have happened. So they're making it a place where we don't want people to come. Whilst we're saying we don't have an issue with car meets themselves, it's that behaviour. So looking at those drivers that are causing issues, for example, in the leisure park, we know that some of these car meets groups are advertising the leisure park as a place to meet. So we're aware of that. So we ask our security team up there to shut the gates. Quite simple things like that, and they move on. Displacement obviously is an issue, so we are looking and working as well with other councils, Hart, Rushmore, Reading, at those groups and those drivers that are coming, because we know they're likely to be the same ones. And then another strand to this that we're looking into now is actually going to the colleges, our local colleges, for the education side of it, around those younger drivers or those drivers that are likely to be passengers that are going to be at the car meets for the kind of entertainment purposes, to kind of get the message home around, one, how dangerous it is, but also how much it can cost them in terms of losing driving licences early, increases in insurance and all those sort of things, fines for faulty vehicles, that sort of thing. So there's lots of strands to it, and it's an ongoing piece. And I think what we need, as Jim said, is people to continuously report to us those things, those drivers, those, if there's footage, things like that, so we can carry on doing things like that. And we're also looking at the places like our own sites, industrial sites, where again there's been cameras on there that's been used, which has been helpful, signage up, and other bits and pieces like that. So there's lots of strands to it. I think that's. Is there any other questions on that?
No, nothing from me. However, I'm going to open it up now. So I've got Councillor Golding first. Yeah.
I'm staying on topic.
Me too.
That's fine. So I just wanted to know if there's anything you can do to monitor kind of illegally modified vehicles, so for cars that have been adapted to kind of drift more, because obviously that presents a risk outside of car meets as well.
You're in danger of indulging my great passion, because prior to being here, I was a roads policing officer for 8 years and would regularly crime all over cars and lorries. Yes, there are very specific rules and regulations which falls under construction and use, and before I bore you to tears, it's basically the stuff that you need to get your car MOT'd. So if your car isn't going to pass an MOT, then it's not lawful. So there are specific officers, and I used to be one of them, that have got very specific powers that we can prohibit, which is deny the movement of cars that we believe that would pose a danger to the public. So if it is being modified for drifting and the tyres are not legal, or there are parts of the bodywork or the steering that are not up to an MOT standard, then we can inspect that vehicle at the roadside and stop it moving. So there aren't very many of those officers, but there are some very strong powers that are available.
Councillor Vo?
Yes, thank you. Still on the same topic. I think it's extremely helpful when the police publish that they have either done spot fines or are prosecuting or have taken a car off the road whenever there's a car meet or whenever you do these things, because that is what our residents want to see, and they do respond very favourably, because that was what the feedback we were getting initially, you know, a couple of years ago when these started. You know, residents were saying, we know some of these cars are not legally here, and you know, why can't something be done? So I think getting that feedback that people do have ramifications of bringing cars that don't meet specs, haven't been insured, haven't got MOTs. I think it's really, really good. So I get a lot of that from I think it's the Basingstoke Cops digital social media stuff. That does hit a lot of residents on their phones, and so I think it's a very, very useful thing to do. And slightly tangential to that, our residents get a lot of targeted car theft, where you know they're going for specific cars, the BMWs, the Mercedes, the Range Rovers, a lot of them the keyless. So again, when the police know that we've got an issue in our area, it's really, really helpful for us as councillors to be able to put that, to remind people again to use Faraday boxes and that kind of thing. So, you know, although you may sometimes feel it's a waste of time putting out some of these measures, actually, for us as councillors, it's really, really useful. Thank you.
So your first question, do we and are we going to continue to publicise? Absolutely, yes, we do. I really encourage my teams to use Basingstoke Cops on Facebook. People, we are getting better at it. I think that historically we've not been as good as publicising the stuff that we do, and there's also certain things that I know, particularly with regards to court cases and stuff, we need to be a little bit careful at which point we publicise those. But we're doing more, and I will continue to push that with my teams. You then come on to a second point with regards to keyless car thefts. So this has been in the media a lot over particularly the last week. We have seen a rise within Basingstoke over the last month, and within the force within the last 3 to 4 months, and this definitely mirrored across other forces nationally, because we've been reaching out with regards to understanding who it is and where it's happening and this kind of thing. So it is, as you see in the media, there are keyless car thefts happening. As people's computers get better, they are now able to replicate people's car keys, and things, as you point out, like Faraday boxes and car and pouches do prevent that happening, and they have to be used. And I will definitely take on board that one way of getting that message out is via you as councillors. I don't think that we've been as good as that as we could be. Certainly one of my team, in fact it's Pete Scammell again, maybe it's him and Cars, has really picked this up last week and has been speaking to our media people about doing a variety of different things. So not only using police social media, which I accept that everybody isn't linked into, but certainly we've been working again with Debbie and Dan to get that message out there, and also trying to do some really old-fashioned types. So we've been looking at getting adverts onto petrol pumps, that kind of thing, to really push that. But I think actually as a room of people you could help us do that, because it is very much about getting that message out there and people understanding some of the things that they can do.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly agree with coming via us. I know certainly my party, we put enough information out to pretty much every letterbox. My wife calls it littering, but essentially a leaflet that we can put some stuff in. If there is information that the council or the police want to get through, then we can help with that. Councillor Slimming.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of issues, but we'll start with speeding, which I'm sure you all get on the doorstep every day. I'm out there, somebody's complaining about speeding in my area and in general, just in total. I'm part of one of my parishes is Pamba. They've got a really good speed watch group, and I managed to buy them 2 extra cameras with my council money, and they've been out and they've been catching people driving in a 30-mile-an-hour limit at 70 miles an hour, etc. So I understand that Speed Watch has been going a long time, and I know in my area it's quite difficult to get people to do it because they all feel they're going to be intimidated. But I understand that there may have been some push to actually increase Speed Watch from our discussion in January when we had it. It would be quite useful to know whether or not you're trying to encourage people to take part in that and how successful and otherwise you think it is. I think last Friday afternoon they were there for about an hour and they caught 50 people in a 30-mile-an-hour limit. So, and they said that was a not as a bad day as normally. So yeah, this is an issue. And alongside that, I understand that e-scooters have been banned and that the Hampshire are concentrating on getting rid of them. I do see them around my area quite a lot. And I would just tell you that I practically got run down with one in London Road coming to this meeting. A young man in the pedestrian area. Obviously, I can't tell you who he was because he was in dark clothes, he has no registration numbers, and he was on no crash helmet. But I'm fortunate I heard him coming behind me just about. But if I were deaf, you know, I may have had a nasty accident. So it'd be interesting to know how you've managed to progress that, because I understand, unless it's Southampton or somewhere, they are actually illegal. And my third point is that please don't just think it's people with Faraday needing Faraday. Personal experience, my partner's grandson had his Red Rover Defender stolen from his front drive this week, or yesterday. His wife was in the house. They broke in through a window and stole the keys, and they live in a village not round here, a few miles away, but obviously they had noted where it was. So anyone with an expensive vehicle is obviously very prone to having things stolen. I think perhaps the message is if he'd have had one of those steering wheel locks on it, he might have not had it stolen, but who knows. But that obviously is quite serious. She was in the house and they broke in, so that's obviously a serious crime. So if you've got an expensive vehicle, you just need to be wary that you could be actually, any time in the middle of the night, somebody come along and break in and steal your keys.
Okay, so quite a few things. So, first of all, very sorry to hear that a member of your family's been a victim of crime, and I can understand how upsetting that would be. That's a very rare type of crime to have somebody breaking into your house. I know that we hear quite a lot about burglary, but actually the numbers are very low within Basingstoke. So, people will steal nice things, and it goes on, and it is a very difficult one way of preventing that. One of the crime prevention suggestions, like you have already said, is to put one of those large steering wheel locks on, which again would be in addition to a Faraday. So coming back to your first question with regards to Community Speed Watch, so that's led by one of my PCSOs, Emma Page, who has been in Basingstoke for a very long time. I'm sure that people will know her. So we very much encourage the community to do that. I don't think that there's been a particular drive from a police side to get volunteers for that, but we very much serve the community and actually all the help that we can get, and it's all about that local ownership, about people becoming involved in that, and it's that presence, and actually it's also about the education that comes off it, because as a result of those, the number plates are recorded, and then we send out advisory letters, because unfortunately as Community Speed Watch you don't have the powers of enforcement yet. So definitely encourage that with my officers doing it. And one of the things that we've got recently with some funding that we've secured from another source is some actual calibrated lasers for my officers to use with regards to speeding, because we know how much that affects the community. So it's just one of those things that we can add to our bow with regards to helping out, and the ability to do that ourselves within the beat office, rather than as we were previously reverting to trying to get traffic officers down to support us. So with regards to e-scooters are a very difficult one, but the force has changed its position recently and has put some really directed stuff out. The problem with e-scooters is that the technology has massively overtaken the legislation. So the legislation says anything that's got any kind of motor in it is a motorbike. So that's kind of the legislation that e-scooters fall under. So if it's a pedal bike with an assistance, and as long as you're pedaling the motor is working, then that's separate legislation that has caught up. But anything that has a motor in it that doesn't involve any physical exertion, you need to think about it as a motorbike, really. And therefore, like a motorbike, you should have a registration plate, a licence, and insurance. And actually, if you don't have any of those things, then there are offences there. So the force has recently done a real drive. Again, it's Inspector Andy Tester, who works over at Havant, who has brought out some new guidance, and actually we just started getting tough on it. So the first time we stop you, we'll give you some advice and we'll say you cannot ride that anymore. The second time we stop you, we will take whatever it is off, whether it's a hoverboard or an e-scooter or all those kind of things, and seize it, and then you need to make an application to the Magistrates Court within 2 weeks to reclaim that device, otherwise it will be crushed. Because we absolutely recognise that people aren't understanding what's going on, which is why the first option is education, but actually after that, there are so many near misses and there have been so many incidents. Now the slight quirk is, how is Southampton and Portsmouth got e-scooters? And because there is another loophole, which again makes it extra complicated, that says if it's an e-scooter that is registered by a company that has an agreement with the local council and it is authorised by them, then that is okay. So actually those e-scooters that you see on the street have got small registration plates and therefore are insured by that company, and to ride it you should have a provisional or a driving licence. And you agree to all of that when you sign up on the app to start with. So that's why you see e-scooters out and about. And of course that's where the confusion comes before the wider public, because you can rent one in Southampton, so why can't I ride my own one in Basingstoke? And actually the rules around where you can ride them is that you can't ride them on the pavement, you can only ride them on cycle paths in the road. So e-scooters are minefield, but we're getting there.
Is this something that the council are going to be looking at as a part of the priorities? I'm keen to make sure that we do consider what some of the priorities should be when we look at this report and the conversation that we're having.
Can probably come in on there, and I think when we look at partnership priorities, and I think there's some elements which we look at where that's best focused in terms of attention to tackle that. With the powers which we've got as council, it would make it very difficult to deal with that. So it's around that, working directly and closely with the police in partnership to address that and provide consistent messages as well. So like with the car meets and things like that, some of our messaging which goes out is shared, just to provide that consistent messaging around that. And I think that continued work in partnership as well, to do some of the things, as well as the intelligence which we can put forward if there are particular complaints which are coming in. So it's looking at, whilst the council can't directly enforce e-scooters, it's around what can we do to help support the police with that approach.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Howard-Tyrrell.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned not passing an MOT is a good way of telling whether your car is illegal or not. Now, a bugbear of mine is really noisy exhausts. I'm sure we've all heard it late at night when they go racing round. Not only are they driving like maniacs, they've got a really loud exhaust on the back, which is just annoying when you're trying to fall asleep at midnight. In fact, last time I was at the Joint Crime and Disorders Scrutiny Overview, whatever, it's quite a long title, that committee over in Aldershot, we were hearing from an officer who was in attendance, and as he was speaking, a really noisy exhaust went past, and it's just like, come on guys, like surely there's more you can be doing. If you hear one, follow that car, take it off the road type thing. That's quite a minor thing. It's just one of my bugbears. I have more points, but I'd like to hear about that first.
So noisy exhausts can be dealt with under the Road Traffic Act. There are, within the traffic department, what is basically a noise meter, which says this is too loud or isn't too loud, and would lead to a fixed penalty notice for having an exhaust that falls outside the regulations. Quite often, whilst noisy, exhausts aren't dangerous, so probably wouldn't lead to an immediate prohibition in that the vehicle wouldn't be taken off the road, but it could be a MOT failure depending on what they've done to it. So it's a balancing act, but the rule of thumb is if you thought that car probably wouldn't pass an MOT, there's probably an offence. With regards to finding that car, chasing it down and dealing with it, yes, if we see it and it's close enough and we can go after it, then we would look to stop it. But it's that balance all the time of trying to do everything all the time. But yeah, on the to-do list.
No, that's fine. I was being slightly facetious. It's, yeah, like I said, it's just really annoying. The other topic that I was hoping to hear something about was parking, specifically parking at school pick-up and drop-off times on double yellow lines, on yellow zigzags, on crosshatches, on pavements, tearing up turf and so on. And not only the parking, but the idling. I mean, we as a council have committed to air quality improvements. I think we've sent people around at school times to various schools all across the borough and handed out a few fines for parents that have been sat there for 10 or 15 minutes pumping out fumes. But it's probably an area that's ripe for profit making if that's your jam as the police. You can go to any school at any pick up or drop off time and get people that are contravening traffic laws in terms of the double yellows. Just more enforcement would be quite good. That's the thing I've heard, other than what's been mentioned most from people in my ward, in other wards, is the fact that these parents are just completely ignoring the rules of the road and parking anywhere for the 2 minutes it takes their kid to run to the door. So if you've got any advice we can pass on to residents about how best to report that or how to improve the situation, that'd be really handy.
I feel your pain as a parent, and would regularly pick up my own children from school, and it wouldn't happen, and then would put on a uniform, and everybody behaved on that day. So it is really hard, and generally the presence of a PCSO or police officer will resolve that issue for that day, and then as soon as they're not there the next day, then it comes back again. And everybody believes that they're more in a rush than everybody else, and it is a very difficult thing. I've had more arguments with anybody than when I was a constable trying to enforce that kind of stuff. So it is an absolute minefield, and with regards to doing it, it's a resource battle as well, because it is very intensive for us to go at all of the different schools. I haven't got enough beat officers and enough hours in the day to do that. It is something that comes up. I know that the links into the school are strong. We try and patrol those things, but we cannot enforce that all of the time so that it ceases to be a problem. And we would look to deal with it by way of advice initially. I know that there have been, I'm not sure about in Basingstoke, but some real drives within the schools about education, and quite often using the children is very effective as part of that. But it is a tricky one, for sure.
Can I just, sorry. This one. Obviously they're not here to speak about this, but just to reference Hampshire County Council in this in terms of responsibility for on-street parking. And I just think if anyone is coming across that issue, it's worth letting them know that they can report that to Hampshire County Council through their website, and we can circulate the link to that if that would be helpful afterwards.
That would certainly be great. I mean, from my perspective, though, the fact that it's now gone back to Hampshire County Council has, in my mind, made things more frustrating because they don't see it as a priority. And yeah, us as members being able to work with officers was a lot easier than that kind of wall that, and I know you guys face it as well, the wall that's like HCC and their firewall of, you know, we don't want to talk to anyone else outside of our organisation. So obviously please do share the link, but it's still a bugbear, I think, for everyone. Have you got a question related to this bit? Yeah, okay, quickly then, thanks.
I'm going to pick up 2 points. Yes, I was going to mention exactly what you have done. Yeah. The Hampshire County Council barrier. I don't know how that can be overcome, but just picking up on what Councillor Sorrell said about this idling of cars. Now, the only thing I believe that the council can affect is that Basingstoke and Dean car parks. In Chinham, we have 3 large car parks, which is associated with car meets as well, but we're addressing that locally. Is it possible for the council to get a message out to the private owners of the private car parks? Because all the time I'm walking through that car park and there must be half a dozen cars idling. Now, people are on their phones. In the colder weather, they're trying to stay warm. But I've approached the management of our particular district centre, and they said, yes, we'll think about it, but they haven't gotten around to it. But I think if it came from the council, that it's a council policy, it might influence some of the private owners of the bigger car parks to sort of try and encourage it. It's an education program again, but if we can sort of lead on you, Daniel, to maybe get a message out, it might help, because it's a message that we're putting out as much as we can already.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Miller. And just to come in on that as well, in relation to, it's not one which as a Safe Community team, we directly lead on, obviously aware of the issues, and it has been a case where with patrol officers being out, they have spoken to people before as well. Generally speaking, when people are advised of it and educated around it, they do take note and listen, and actually sometimes it can be a lack of awareness. Sometimes there is a case of bone idleness as well, so which is why some of the powers exist. But in terms of that kind of education piece, and I know that there has been education campaigns in particular areas which have been targeted. So there was a recent issue which had come up at a school, and some signage had been displayed outside the school, and that was working directly with Hampshire County Council, with our environmental health team who lead on the engine idling, as well as our green team as well, to link in with some of that. So I think where there's opportunities to provide that education, I think they could be considered, and I think it's looking at them avenues of where that can go and maybe exploring that in a little bit more detail. But as I say, it's not me which would directly lead on that piece of work, so would need an approach across the organisation as well.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Compton-Burnett.
Thank you. I firstly wanted to say a huge thank you to you and your teams, because you help us in so many different ways, and I've been involved with a few issues recently in the ward, and all the different people have worked together, the police officers and the CSPOs and the PCSOs, and it's great to see the different roles and how you all come together, so thank you. I wanted to ask about the team, really, because now that we've got the neighbourhood police officers in place and the PCSOs and CSPOs, it would be great for all of us to understand a little bit more about what are the different roles, who do we contact about what, maybe even have a photograph of the three of you together that can go into the wards so they can see, look, these are the guys that are helping you. And I was wondering whether it would be helpful to have something a bit like the NHS, where they have this, you can't really see it from here, but you know, when with the emergency services, they were having so much trouble with people having a cut finger and going straight to A&E. And actually they wanted to say, no, can you try and put a plaster on it? Or could you go to pharmacy or phone 111? And I think it would be really helpful if you could do some sort of image that we could all use all the time, so we didn't keep bothering all of you with the same issue when we should have just gone to one of you. And just associated with that, we recently had an issue in our ward where a number of people in a particular area were asked to keep reporting about something. And that was great, and apparently it was really helpful. But what we didn't know was when to stop reporting. So we carried on reporting and reporting and reporting. And what would be really helpful is if there could be a key contact person that we can go to and say, should we stop now? Or do you want a different sort of information? Or the other thing was that some of the people felt at risk of harm. And it would be great to hear, actually, the guy's been arrested. Don't worry now. Thank you.
Thank you. You can probably come in on answering some of them points, and thanks for your kind words in relation to the partnership work which goes on. It's something which certainly I know that the team feel particularly proud about, and something which I think we do very well across Basingstoke and Deane, and having them partnership links. I think there's a couple of points which I can pick up on which directly link into some of that work, and I think that comes with and Jim may be able to expound on it slightly in a minute as well, in relation to the neighbourhood policing model and having designated neighbourhood officers, as well as that link in with the community safety patrol officers as well out and about. And I really like your idea in relation to having a almost like the NHS of where to report things and who to report things. So that's certainly something which we can take away and have an explore about and look at in a little bit more detail as well. We do already have something fairly similar for some of our town centre businesses. So this was raised as a result of antisocial behaviour and crime and knowing the best place to report things to. And yeah, it's a few years old now, but we've refreshed it on a number of times. And it's more of a guide, but something which we could maybe utilise that approach with would be a good idea for wider reporting and where to report things to. Could be a good opportunity to look at that a little bit further. In relation to some of the partnership work, we've with the introduction of the neighbourhood policing model, as well as working with our local housing associations as well, particularly our biggest two of Sovereign Network Group and Vivid in the local area. We organised recently a networking event for officers. And that was a real get-together in terms of some of the change in approaches from different organisations. So Sovereign have changed their operating model recently, the police with designated neighbourhood officers coming in. And it's really around for us continuing that strong partnership ethos and building that together. And a lot of that is around that talking. And I think probably over COVID period, we lost some of that. And it's around that really bringing that back. And actually, if everyone's talking together, and I think having them networking opportunities as well as them opportunities to speak with local communities and for local communities to have that point of contact to go to, that can really help with some of them issues which they might be coming across. And I think going back to your question in relation to reporting and when to stop reporting, I would say that any time people are witnessing either antisocial behaviour or crime, then they should be, ideally we'd be encouraging them to report that. The knowing when to stop is a difficult one, and I think having that kind of name point of contact and someone which they can go to is going to be vitally important as well, because that's where that advice can come from. We will say, as a general rule, if you're experiencing crime or antisocial behaviour, then really want to encourage you to report that. But knowing when to stop or knowing when to get advice, that comes down to a lot of the time having them points of contact to go to where you need them more sort of detailed discussions. So definitely think by the approach of neighbourhood policing officers, as well as our contacts with our community safety patrol officers, and we've assigned geographical points of contact for exactly that reason within the CSBO team. So each officer has a dedicated point of contact. It normally covers 2 ward areas, and they can have that direct link with that community as well.
I feel I should probably add a little bit more to that. So in the last couple of months, we've introduced the designated neighbourhood officers. So it's interesting that Dan should talk about how we should talk more, and that does kind of steal one of the titles. So as part of the Hampshire Alert System, under the new catchphrase of Let's Talk, you can go onto there, you can put in your postcode, and it will direct you to who your designated neighbourhood officer is. I have got a couple of vacancies that have arisen in the last month or so due to officers leaving me, which I'm very sad about, and going on to do other things. So it's not completely full at the moment. I am carrying just a couple of vacancies in the west of Basingstoke, but I'm hoping to fill those before too long. And within that is the officer's photograph and contact details. And actually on some of our Basingstoke COPS Facebook pages recently, some of those officers have started doing social media posts introducing themselves to the community. And that's been going down very well. Certainly we can work with the council. I do like that idea, similar to the A&E style posters of where to go and what to do and how to do it. There is some advice and bits and bobs on our website with regards to contacting us to report crime and how we would prefer you reported that and the different directions in which you can go. I think it's interesting that you should say that when you should stop reporting things. I do an awful lot of my analysis around Basingstoke crime trends, heat maps, hotspots, that kind of thing, around the volume of reports and the type of reports that they are. So I would hope that you stopped reporting it at the point that we'd stop that problem. And actually, if you stopped reporting it before it was resolved, then that might not give me all the information that I needed to try and make a decision around where to direct my resources to. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Sorry, I should clarify. We were asked to report any vehicle in a certain place, and we started ending up reporting people's visitors and their families, and so it was great to someone say, no, it's fine, he's been arrested.
That makes a bit more sense. Okay, yes, thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Vo again.
Thanks very much. So I was going to talk about if you're designated neighbourhood officers, who I do find it easier to call them local bobbies. I'm really sorry. It's a bit of vernacular, but it is easier. I'd say, you know, I've been really impressed with ours in Chinham.
Absolutely.
PC Frosted. It's been absolutely amazing. Yeah. Very responsive to things that residents are bringing up, including speeding. You know, he's been out and on the roads that residents have expressed concern on. He has been to a lot of community events, arranged to go and meet over 55s, youth clubs. You know, he's really getting to be known in our local communities, and I think that's a really good start. So, you know, I would recommend to any councillor to get in touch with local bobby and create a relationship and help them integrate into our communities, because it's really important that we all recognise them out and about. So my question really is about that working. You know, you talked about how well we work together across the community safety team, our CSPOs, and our local bobbies. And I wonder if you could, because it's quite a new relationship specifically with local bobbies, and it feels to me as a councillor that there should be a really close relationship between those two roles, particularly strong, because it's very much down in the weeds of what's happening in our communities. And if you could just share with us how our CSPOs and our local bobbies are working together and how they share intelligence, do they meet regularly, that kind of thing. Thank you.
Can make a start on some of them points as well, Councillor Wilkes. I think a daily basis to start with in relation to the partnership working which happens, and I think that's from a level of a operational and tactical management level, as well as that operational ground level, really getting into communities. So the police have a daily management meeting which they coordinate, and we attend as the council on that daily management meeting, which looks at the kind of most recent overview of what's actually happening in the last 24-hour period with crime and antisocial behaviour across Basingstoke and Deane. That way we can have that link to say, if there's a particular issue, it might be more antisocial behaviour related, where the CSPOs can potentially get involved. That could be something where we can direct them to, which can then be built into their daily briefing as well. I think, the work which happens can take place at shared briefing sessions. So if there's particular issues going on, there can be shared briefings. If there's particular campaigns or work which is happening, the two would communicate on a daily basis in relation to working directly with communities and that sharing of information. So with the community safety patrol officers, and I think for other professional organisations as well, so with the schools, with some of them, community organisations as well, with local councillors, it's around that sharing community intelligence. And I think that's a really big thing, and something which we do very well in Basingstoke. Get sent on a quarterly basis, I think it's quarterly, it might be monthly now, the figures in relation to intelligence which is shared with the police. Across Hampshire, Basingstoke and Deane is always one of the highest in the area. And I think, a lot of that comes from the council, but actually it's around us getting out their messages in relation to how important it is and how useful that is with the police to share that community intelligence, what's actually being said, because that helps to inform decision making, that helps to inform and build a bigger picture of some of them things which may be going on. And our CSPOs and our local neighbourhood policing officers will have conversations and discuss that on a regular basis. One of the reasons which we organised the most recent networking event for officers was because actually we've had quite a few new people in all of the teams, with the police, with the CSPOs, with some of our colleagues from the housing sector as well. there's been quite a few new members of staff, and it's around them building them contacts. And that's the most important thing when you're working directly with communities, having them contacts, knowing who to go to, having them opportunities to talk, and to be able to pick up the phone and say, notice this, or to have a discussion around how this issue is affecting the local community, how can we work together to best resolve it.
Thank you. So, I mean, that's really good to hear that we are getting joint intelligence in that way, and you're at joint briefings and things. I would just say that I think it's important that we're seen to be working together, as well as what's going on behind the scenes. So there have been multitudes of opportunities for our CSPO in Chinham to have been at some of these events with PC Frostic, including being outside Tesco's. I mean, I was there doing community safety stuff, you know, window locks, door locks. There was a steady stream of people coming to the desk there with the PCSO and PC Frostic. And those kinds of events would be really, really good for our CSPOs to be seen as well. So I think if you could think a little bit broader about how actually they can do things together, I think it would be fantastic. I realise it's always difficult to work diaries together, and it's that extra bit of effort which is frustrating and difficult, but I do think if we can, it's very good for our public to see that we're working together so well. And one just aside that we had a recent request for support at one of our primary schools, and it was very, very impressive the way the CSPO team and our local body were able to respond, and we were able to meet with the school within days of that happening, which I thought was fantastic. But one of the things that hadn't occurred to me before was an observation at the school that although it's great if CSPOs and or officers are able to pop into the schools, actually the school does need some warning because of the vulnerability of some of the students who are particularly vulnerable and do not necessarily react well when a uniformed person appears, which I don't think it takes a lot of imagination to understand what kind of situations those are. And so when the school knows that somebody's going to pop in, they welcome it, but they are able to do something to support those children who may find it potentially a distressing entrance into the school. So I thought I'd mention it because I thought it was something that hadn't occurred to me before. Thank you.
Yeah, I think with the first point, I think yes, a useful point, and I think it's something which we can take away with going into schools, and it's something which we do encourage. And I think having young people having really positive interactions with uniformed officers is a really good thing. Certainly from my perspective and with the CSPO team, it's around that encouragement of with particularly them points of contact in them geographical areas. Making them contacts and having that direct link in with the school and finding out what the needs of the school are as well. Something which we're very keen on is having a trauma-informed approach in relation to how we work with the community in general. And I think having that understanding and being trauma-informed is really important. And naturally that sometimes takes a different approach, but depending on the school and how they interact. So I think it's very much on a kind of needs basis, and I think having that encouragement for officers to speak directly with their schools, get to know the head teachers. Some schools better to work with than others in terms of you get some which are very, very welcoming and some which don't want as much interaction. So it's working and knowing how to work with that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be slightly optimistic and ask about cause of crime and any community engagement or support schemes that might be in place to reduce crime. So the report does mention it briefly, the North Hampshire Partnership, Safer North Hampshire Community Safety Partnership looks at causes of crime and trying to reduce crime and antisocial behaviour on a regular basis. but then we've seen the stats in this report say that we've had, so I'm just trying to find it, robbery increased by 17%, burglary business go up by 20%. Those are the two that you might be able to reduce through community efforts more than some of the other things on here. So I'm just wondering what sort of partnerships are in place between the police, the council, the CPSOs, and so on, to signpost people who might be shoplifting because they're desperate, they're hungry, so signpost them to food banks. They might be homeless, so signpost them to support charities or to the council who might be able to find them housing. I'm sure this is all work you're doing. I just couldn't find a great amount of detail in the report, so I'm really curious to find out how we're supporting what is a very vulnerable group of people. Just because they're committing crimes, they still deserve support. So it's something that I'd be very curious to hear more about.
Yeah, most certainly, and that's yeah, very topical. And I think with the work of the Community Safety Partnership, it is around reviewing them trends and what's actually happening. And we receive a report on a regular basis at the Community Safety Partnership meetings around things which may be affecting that. And again, it comes down to that kind of partnership effort of working directly with some of them other statutory agencies, as well as some of our community organisations as well, to how we can best support that. So there's a range of things which we have at the council in relation to supporting vulnerable people. In particular, our social inclusion partnership and the work which they do really helps to drive some of that work. We directly link in with that and work with colleagues in the SIP and are involved in that as well. With some of our more vulnerable people and links to crime, it's important that we're able to be aware of that. I think it's around taking that trauma-informed approach again, and understanding where crimes are happening, sometimes some of the cause of that. Not that when a crime has happened and someone's been responsible for that, then obviously there's that needs to be addressed. But there's also the wider issues of where that person can seek help and support. And there's a range of services which help to direct them to the correct help and support. And I think it's something which we're really good at across the Basingstoke area of finding the right support for people. Obviously, they've got to want and accept that to move forward, which can sometimes be difficult because of things going on in people's lives and their lifestyles. Can be very difficult to get out of challenging situations, but it's something which, as a team, we're very much aware of, and it's important to direct people to support in the right way. So just as a bit of an example of that, one of the things which we do on a fairly regular basis is some joint patrols with our outreach teams, supporting people which may be rough sleeping or street attached within the borough as well.
That's all really good to hear. One of the things that I came across recently, actually, rather sadly almost, because I'm a magistrate, and I only recently was made aware of I think it's called the intervention and, I can't remember what the phrase is, it's the intervention and diversion service. I think that's within the courts. Once people have been processed, it can prevent them from needing to interact with the prison system or probation or anything like that. And I'm wondering if that sort of scheme would be useful to have outreach programs, for example, in schools. People, young people that might be, should we say, early in their careers as potential law-abiding citizens or not, as it were, often aren't aware of these support schemes, and having that education beyond what's already been done for offending adults, so to speak, might be quite good. Yeah, that wasn't the most cohesive thought, but it was really interesting for me to find out as a magistrate, because I discussed it with colleagues when we were sitting, and some of them that had been sitting for 20 years had never even heard of this service. I don't know if it's relatively new. I don't know if you particularly know anything about it more than I do, but it's just as something that is in place, I think it's a really valuable system.
So are you referring to the Hampshire Liaison and Diversion Service? HLDS?
No, I don't think so.
Because I know that they do work within the courts, and there is a massive piece of work around risk assessing people and directing them towards the most appropriate thing. So along with writing crime reports, we spend as much time writing crime reports as we do writing risk assessments in order to try and direct children and adults to the right services and making sure that all the right people are aware of all of those things. So there is a massive, massive body of people, so both police officers and youth prevention and social services and that all sit together and they review risk assessments around who's coming in, and then all of those agencies as part of the multi-agency safeguarding hub, of which there are some scattered around Hampshire, of all these professionals that sit in the same room, discuss what they've got on their systems and therefore what is the most appropriate avenue and what they get from reading between the lines of the officers attending, and actually whether they've got to ask those people who've put in those reports, whether that's officers or other agencies, around what is the best and most appropriate diversion service or not for those people. So with regards to Hampshire Liaison Diversion Service, so whether that's those people, but they definitely work within the court system and they also work within the police cells. And actually, if people come in with any type of vulnerability, whether that's around mental health or substance abuse and or anything else that raises a concern, then they can be directed either whilst they're in the cells or for a follow-up appointment to engage with those professionals to try and seek some help with regards to a diversion and or with regards to the criminal justice process. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Slimin is up next up.
Thank you. I'm going to divert a little bit. Antisocial behaviour, we all know that it's common everywhere, and underage drinking as well. I'm sure that we've all had experience of young people who congregate in our public places, council and land, and drink underage, and that often leads to the fact that they then have access to people who want to supply them with other drugs, and so it's quite difficult. I know that there are some moves afoot, potentially by a young man who lives in my area, who used to be on council with me, and maybe we can tell the rest of the committee, and I hope that that will be something that we can pick up to work in the future with. So that is really a good move, I hope. Obviously, I know it's quite new off the thing, it's not in place yet. But obviously, it is quite serious for all of us because, as you say, if young people start off on the bad road and they have alcohol, they do actually do other things that perhaps they shouldn't do, and obviously their judgment is impaired. So I think it's quite important that the message is, again, this is education, making sure that young people understand the implications of what they're doing and how it affects other people, because often they don't even realise what they're actually, how they're impeding other people's lives. And we get an awful lot in my area of young people, particularly with the summer coming, hang about in borough council land, smoking cannabis and making lots of noise and using inappropriate language, and people get very upset about it, and every year they ask us to remove the play area or they ask us to remove the seats or whatever, which, you know, we try to resist because hopefully we can actually deal with it, but that's fine. The second issue, I know also there are a lot of women in the country, not just in Basingstoke and Dean, but in the whole country, who are quite concerned about their safety. Maybe not so much in the villages, although I suspect there is some, but anywhere there is a built-up area, there are areas where women perhaps don't feel as safe. So it would be useful to know what the council can do to make people safer. I know in the report you've mentioned some extra CCTV, whether there are plans to put more in. I can think of places where even I feel uncomfortable walking on my own at night, as I often do, straight from this council down to the bus station. And the bus station itself is not the most friendly of places at certain times of the night. So again, I'm sure there are other things to do with that. And the third thing is about communication, which everybody's touched on already. I see in the report you mentioned the people that came to your event that you held earlier this year. And it was an event, it was held in the south of the borough. It was held in a place that I couldn't access because I don't drive. And I wonder whether you're thinking of doing any more. And I would say to you that Tally Town Council are very happy to host such an event in the Town Council office, and we would very much welcome meeting the new PCSOs and teams that are in our area, because we haven't yet met them, although I know they've been to some of the ones in the area. I think they've been to Ashford Hill and some others, but they haven't yet been to Tadley. And why that is a little bit disappointing for me is that years ago, before COVID, we used to have regular police liaison meetings with our local policemen once a month or so, and we'd give intelligence as councillors. We used to share what was coming with us, and obviously that would be helpful. And so when had big incidents like we did in the past, we actually had the contacts and was able to do some things. Obviously COVID and your lack of resources over the years has meant that you weren't able to do that. But I think in a place like Tadley, which is the next biggest town to Basingstoke, I'm not saying we're a hotspot of crime, but we do have incidents, and we all get that knowledge, and it would be useful to be able to share that at some point on some sort of regular basis. I'm sure that places like Whitchurch might have the same issue, maybe Kingsley, the bigger parishes might have some issues. So I hope that we can look at that and take that on board as well.
Before you jump in, I'm very conscious again around it being specific. I guess take Inspector Jim Gallimore's contact details afterwards, and it'll be quite quick to follow up in terms of invites and the such. I don't think it's a discussion in the committee over that.
Just regarding the points in relation to underage drinking and the safety of women and girls in particular, just a couple of points just to bring up on that, because there are naturally underage drinking can fall into it's what's the effect of that, and that can sometimes lead to antisocial behaviour happening as well. So two of them areas fit directly in relation to our community safety partnership priorities. In relation to the underage drinking aspect of things, obviously our CSPOs are around and about and can deal with any antisocial behaviour, and as a result underage drinking as well. And they do have powers where they can seize alcohol from people which are underage or appear to be underage as well. We probably don't get as many instances as we used to get, maybe a decade or so ago, but it is something which we're aware of and can proactively deal with if that's seen. I think the important thing is around building that community intelligence of where that's going on and having them interactions between the local communities and officers, and building that picture of where issues are happening, as well as encourage reporting and really getting an understanding of the impacts which that behaviour is having on the local community is really useful, because that can help direct and target patrols, and then issues can be dealt with. And I think we'll always look at things before we go into looking at other measures which might be potentially more robust or intrusive, like CCTV, or expensive. It's always looking at, can we resolve things at an earlier stage and have them early interventions? And I think that approach and using that can be really important to help to resolve issues. Naturally, we would deal with any underage drinking as a safeguarding issue as well. So it's around that, speaking to parents, having that conversation, and looking at the education element. And we've recently, I know that Debbie's recently met with the Community Alcohol Partnership in relation to considering whether there's any work which we can undertake in partnership together in the local area. So that will be considered as well. In relation to safety of women and girls, there's a centrally coordinated strategy across the Hampshire, Isle of Wight, Portsmouth and Southampton area, which is coordinated by the Police and Crime Commissioner. So that delivers an action plan of some of the bits which can help to reduce the impacts and increase the feeling of safety, particularly for women and girls. That directly as well links into our community safety partnership priorities, and we do have a specific action plan which links in with that Hampshire-wide one for our local area as well, and working towards some of the elements of that to help increase the feeling of safety in local communities. So just to give a few examples of some local initiatives which we've worked with over the last year and are working towards as well. So I don't know if you're aware of the Street Safe reporting app, which can be really useful and provides any person. It's particularly aimed towards women and girls, but it does provide any person the opportunity to go onto the police.uk website, an area which you don't feel safe in. You could make a direct report on that. And that will then reports are analysed by our community safety analyst, and we can look at what other measures can be put in place to help reduce that kind of risk in that local area. So, for instance, if there's an area which feels particularly dark or street lights are out, if we're aware of them from that intelligence and information coming directly from the community, particularly if they're on council land or our partners' land, which we're working with on a day-to-day basis, they can be really quick wins. Just to help if it's a few streetlights which are out, sometimes that can make a world of difference to help improve people's feeling of safety. So it's just them sort of tangible things which we can look at or look at where there's issues. If there's things which maybe require a little bit more a longer term planning approach, maybe they need some funding looked at them to look at actually reducing the impact of the issue. That's something which we can then go, okay, well, this is here. If there are any funding opportunities, say, for instance, through the Safer Streets Fund or any other initiatives which come out, actually they're on the list which we know that these are areas where there's an evidence base to do something, so we can consider that as well. There's been, and the police coordinated it, some violence against women and girls walks specifically for women and girls in the local area, and I think both the colleges at QMC and BCOT, where there was walks which took place with officers and members of the local community, and helped to point out areas where people feel safe, help to improve that link and communication with the police as well, and council CSPOs or council staff, which was really helpful. We're currently running, I think I've referenced it in the report as well, in relation to safer streets, and some of the work which is going on in relation to how that links with Borg as well. So part of that programme, we've got mentors in violence prevention. So that's working specifically with schools and how they can work directly with young people where there might be violence, and for schools to be empowered to be able to address that properly. We've got the community in motion active bystander training. So we've had a couple of people trained up to be able to deliver active bystander training to help people kind of know where to go if they're witnessing things, and how to be a safe active bystander as well, and knowing what they can do. So hopefully that's something which we can roll out over the next year. As well as that, venues, particularly kind of town centre focused on our nighttime economy, venues which are safe spaces, and they'll have that We Stand Together certification where their staff will then receive training in relation to if someone comes in and perhaps reports something where they might have been harassed, or there might have been something else which has happened, that they've got the training and knowledge of knowing how to help them most appropriately. There is things, obviously, within our town centre area. We do have CCTV, and there's been various different promotions and licensing activity which has happened with the nighttime economy venues already as well. And we do have our street pastors as well within the local town centre area, and they're part funded by community safety grants from the Police and Crime Commissioner as well, and obviously something which we strongly support when they apply for that. Hopefully that just gives a little bit of a flavour of some of the work which takes place in relation to both of them subjects. And yeah, with as Councillor Lee said, with different communications, we'd definitely encourage that local links to look at where opportunities can be explored to do that close working relationship, whether that's with the town council or other parishes or other local areas and community groups as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vo next. Just before you ask, we've got 3 questions remaining if you include myself. Has anybody else got any questions? I'm keen to wrap up on questions. Not at the moment? Okay, cool. Councillor Vo.
Thanks. I shall put 2 into 1. The thing we haven't talked about yet that does come through to councillors a lot is drugs. Isn't mentioned at all in this paper. I think it's swept up under antisocial behaviour probably. So I get that there is an awful lot of work that's done by a police force on county lines, and we've talked about it a lot in committee and as individual councillors, and we understand how difficult it is, us being a major railway station coming from London and all sorts of other things makes it really difficult. So rather than talk about that aspect, unless other people want to, I was wanting to focus more on what happens at our councillor level. So we get a lot of residents who complain about drug taking of their neighbours and feeling that they're not listened to, and that it's so minor, they can't get anybody's attention to resolve it. We do get sometimes reports of, I know that these people are gathering, young people are gathering and dealing drugs in a particular area. And in actual fact, even that, I find often I can get some results with that, because you can put patrols there, you can do something with it. But so it's really that the difficulty with this neighbourhood recreational drug use is something which we all, I think, struggle with. Sometimes in housing associations, if it is in housing associations, we can often engage with the housing associations and ask for their support, but it isn't always. Sometimes it's in private dwellings as well. And I wondered if you could help us by explaining, do our CSPOs have any ability to be able to do anything around recreational drug taking, that kind of antisocial behaviour, and what advice you might be able, both of you, give to us when we get residents who contact us. Thank you. Oh, and my second one, sorry, is around, in the report, I noticed there's a hate crime working group, which sounds very powerful, particularly topical. It may not be appropriate for this meeting, it might be easier. I thought it would be helpful for committee members to hear about what their outputs are, what do they do. It's interesting that they are there, but I wondered what kind of activities and actions they take, and if it would be easier to circulate an action plan that they're doing or something like that to members, then by all means, please do that. Thank you.
Can come in on the drugs question, and particularly in relation to what can the CSPOs do around it. Well, there's no specific powers which the CSPOs have in relation to drugs offences, and I think we need to be very clear on that. The difference between what the police can do and what they can action, and what our CSPOs can do as well. And I think it's around that. That ensuring that them roles are defined as well, and that's something which we work closely with and ensure there is that difference as well. However, it doesn't mean that they're not coming across things within local communities, and it's around that response which can be given to that at the time. That can be then things like patrols and that reassurance and the deterrence which patrols may offer, but it can also be looking at the wider kind of contextual stuff as well. Is there anything which can be changed as a result of that? A big thing which we look at is in relation to that community intelligence piece, and really kind of looking at if there is things which are witnessed, whether that's with our CSBOs, whether that's through what local residents are reporting to you as members. It's around that intelligence picture which can be gathered as well, to really kind of look at and help support the police in how they can deal and enforce drug issues, particularly where there's dealing or drugs offences which have been committed. It links in, and I think there's a correlation and intrinsic link between drugs and serious violence. And there is legislation which has come in relation to the serious violence duty. And that's something which, as a partnership, which we've been working really closely on with colleagues across the Violence Reduction Partnership and the Violence Reduction Unit, which is hosted by the Officers and Police and Crime Commissioner, which puts together a strategy around some of them things. We've taken that one step further locally, and we have got a local level response to partnership work around serious violence. In its relative infancy at the moment, but really looking at exploring them kind of local level issues and some of the response measures which we can work with partnership, whether that's with the council and the police and with other statutory agencies and those specified authorities under the duty. But really, it's around that focus on the community and the third party sector as well, around how we can work together with them and recognise what are the things which are going to make a difference. So that could be That could be where we can direct people to what are the services around. Is there the youth groups which can be targeted? Is there direct work which can support people which may need support? So it's a kind of wider picture look at things from a kind of strategic approach and how that operates on a local level as well. The hate crime working group, I think certainly we can get some information and share some of what that looks like with councillors following the meeting.
Coming on some of those points, drugs are a problem everywhere, and you know we don't need to go back down the county lines and go through that again. With regards to dealing with people who are using it in their own houses, that is very, very hard. And as you've already alluded to, if it's a housing association, then there are certain powers and policies that we can use to try and do that. If it is private, it is very difficult, and also it's a resourcing and a risk thing for us as well, where we need to be looking at everything that is reported to the police and then making decisions around which are the things that we need to target to reduce the most amount of risk. And actually, if there are numerous concerns and it involves children and those kind of things, then that would increase it, and we may look to get involved, and we may not look at that point with regards to an enforcement, because possession of illegal drugs is illegal. You know, it doesn't, just because it's in your house, it doesn't make it okay. But actually, at that point, we may look to other agencies about how they could support us, whether that's through the school or social services, and to see what we could do with regards to that. And you know, as you said, with regards to gathering, dealing drugs, that does come up higher and is easier to deal with. So we go with that. I think that was it.
Yeah, just in relation to the hate crime working group, I know Dan said we'll get some more information out around that, but one of the key things apart of that is around engaging in education with young people. So those are one of the things that we're looking at, but we'll share more information, more details around all of that work with you after this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Compton-Burnett.
Thank you. Two quick things about young people. The first one is very noisy scooters, which is a big problem in Winklebury. I was told about a year ago that somebody knew, that various people knew or where the noisy scooters lived, but nothing had been done about it. Now, it might well be that it now has been addressed, but there are still some noisy scooters around. So if people are aware where a noisy scooter lives, what should they do? The second thing is, I was talking to a parent recently whose son had just passed his driving test, and she had been looking online she was a bit worried about his driving, and she'd been looking online for videos that sort of slightly scared him about driving recklessly, and could find absolutely nothing. And I just wondered, because I then asked other people and they'd similarly not been able to find anything, whether there was anything you could recommend, because I imagine that this is something that a lot of people will benefit from. Thank you.
I have no idea to go to find scary driving videos, I'm afraid. Yeah, that's a new one on me. Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's something that I could take away and talk to our Safer Roads team. They might have something. Yes. So let me write myself an action before I forget, to the Safer Roads team. And then with regards to your other question around noisy scooters, it is exactly the same as having a noisy exhaust. With regards to being dealt with and fined, it needs to be being driven on the road, because you can have anything that you want in your garage, because in theory you could then take it to a racetrack. We would encourage people to report things like that to us so that we get the registrations, and then it's the kind of thing that we can build up a pattern, and you know, as and when we get the opportunity, we can patrol and see if we can find it. But we wouldn't be going to people's houses to say, can I have a look at your moped? That's unlawful, because at the point that it's not on the road and not being ridden, then you can have whatever you want.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just check, if they had camera footage of it being driven on a road or a pavement, would that help?
Not with regards to the offence of having a noisy exhaust, and if you have footage of poor driving, then you can send that in through, I think it's HanSnap. There's definitely a link on our website that you need to look at, and then the standards of driving offences could be, but we could never look to prosecute somebody off a video for a noisy exhaust.
Thank you very much. No more questions from any of the members? Great. So I'm just going to ask one final question to you, Jim. I'm very conscious we have a police officer in front of us, and it's a perfect opportunity for obviously everyone to just bombard him with questions out of the blue, which is great. We come here as a committee asking a lot of questions of you. How can we as ward members help you, and what are the priorities that the Hampshire Police are setting for either Hampshire, or do you set at a Basingstoke level or separate priorities in terms of issues that you would like to address and combat, and how can we help you address those?
You've teed me up brilliantly to talk about CPI forms. We've already spoken a number of times, haven't we, about information and intelligence coming into the police. You are absolutely the eyes and the ears out there with people telling you stuff all the time. And actually what we would really, really like you to do is to continue Basingstoke and Dean's Council's amazing numbers of CPI forms that go in. And actually, if you could do that and take that on yourself. And the way that you do that is if you go on the Safe For Me website, there's one of the tabs on there is partnerships, and it's through that, and you can submit the form. And what we really want you to do, because actually not only is the information that you give us really important, but actually it's really interesting to us to understand where you've heard it. So if you submit the information, you're generally the second person that might have heard it. Whereas if you then go and tell somebody else or email it in, we tend to lose some of that information that sits within it, which kind of affects how we grade it. So the sooner that you tell us with the least number of people in that chain, the better it is. So CPI forms, that would be amazing. That really supports us. We do set priorities for Basingstoke. In fact, we set them yesterday at our monthly district meeting. We look at district priorities we really need to focus on this, but there's also lots of other stuff that sits underneath that as business as usual. And sometimes having focused on something, it goes from being a priority to a business as usual. So 6 to 9 months ago, we really focused on some of the town centre, antisocial behaviour and shoplifting, and that came under a massive piece of work called White Hart. So that used Basingstoke Town Centre partnership with Festival Place and the police and the CSBOs and everybody working together to not only look at recent offenders but also vulnerability and how we were using that. And actually that was so successful that that's just become business as usual. And another of my sergeants, Sergeant Glenn Spearling, leads on that and has lots of meetings with Debbie and Dan and talks about all of that stuff. So the priorities that we've got at the moment are probably not too surprising for you, which is there's drug-related harm at the moment. We're, inevitably always looking at that with regards to county lines and what's going on within Basingstoke, and being really careful that we don't think of Basingstoke and Dean as being just the town. Actually, some of the rural crime stuff around under Op Galileo, led by Sergeant Martin Evans. So that looks at hair coursing, poaching, and some of the rural crime bits that sit with that, with all the really joined up working that he does with the Country Watch team and across the wider rural.
Brilliant, thank you. If I can ask that somebody send out details of those DPI forms and how we can fill them in, not just to the members here, but to the wider committee group, to members, sorry.
Yeah, certainly we can share that on the councillor's email and provide some link to that as well. But we did look at potentially some a training opportunity for that as well. So if it's something which would be of interest to members, that's something which we could explore further as well. But that would be with the intelligence lead for the police. It has changed from who it used to be, who I was in contact with. So I'm not sure if that offer still exists, but can certainly explore it again if that would be something beneficial for members.
Yeah, I think it certainly would be. Sorry, Debbie, I think it would be.
So just saying, in terms of another thing that would be really helpful, because you are out there seeing people that are willing to get involved in communities, it's those kind of things as well. So if you know people that might want to be involved in neighbourhood watch schemes and things like that, then again we can put you in contact with those to start getting those schemes up, because there are sort of dead spots across the borough now where coordinators perhaps have moved on and things like that. So they're very keen, and we work very closely with our Neighbourhood Watch colleagues to promote that scheme. So if there are things there where the people want to get involved, then we can put you in contact with them as well.
Thank you very much. So does anybody have any additional comments then from tonight? Specifically, I guess I've had a look through the report itself. A lot of what we were talking about, a lot of the questions do relate to a lot of what your priorities are anyway, which is good that we're all on the same train of thought. Any other comments that anybody would like to add, though? Councillor Vey?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to emphasise when it comes to communication, I would like to encourage the digital communication that has been happening from Basingstoke COPs and other ways for us to be able to demonstrate to residents that things happen. That has been the missing link for us as councillors when, as Councillor Compton Burnett says, we're asked to report, use 101, use the website, use various ways of reporting things, but inevitably it often goes into what feels like dark holes. So I would like, Chair, for us to emphasise that as something that is very beneficial both ways. I think it does help, when we've got space of particular crimes like the car theft we talked about, it helps reduce that crime because we're reminding people that it is worth locking their keys away and keeping them away from windows and things. Those timely things, I think, really, really help.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. I know in the report itself, it does talk about, communication and continuing that communication, but obviously it's something for Jim to take away on police side to reinforce the communication side, which hopefully we'll get some messages out. So in terms of the report itself then, we've got a recommendation to note the contents of the report and the work carried out by the Safer Communities team, contributing to local priorities and the Safer North Hampshire Community Safety Partnership strategic priorities. It's a mouthful. And that views are sought on the key community safety issues that elected members have heard from communities during the past year, which they feel should be considered when setting priorities. I think we've covered that. We're pretty much in alignment, which is good. And some topics that elected members would find useful to cover in any future briefing to support their role in tackling antisocial behaviour within their wards. So we've got the information on the DPI forms, and we discussed yesterday about trying to bring the training forward in terms of member development as part of the new council municipal year when after the elections, which will be great. Anything else? No, everyone agreed on the report itself? Everyone happy? Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for coming down. Really useful. I think we can continue if you guys want to call it a night. That'd be great.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
So we now move on to our work programme. I did have a look. We have got, let me just bring it up again, sorry. We've got in June after the elections, the Integrated Care Board and HCC to identify any impacts on opportunities for the council and the wellbeing strategy. And there is also some progress on the implementation of the climate change and air quality strategy. There was also, as I mentioned at the last CP, and obviously from the full council on the ice rink, as part of that, there was actually two recommendations which has changed now to one. So the first was around the investigation, a report on the investigation to be brought to CEP. That's changed now because, and luckily Councillor Miller, you're here, it's referring it to scrutiny to conduct that investigation, and hopefully the scrutiny will be willing to take that on rather than an independent investigation. And then we will receive a report, hopefully in June, on how the council may be able to provide the necessary temporary facilities to the standards required to support ice hockey and figure skating in the borough whilst any repairs take place.
Excuse me, smiling chair, been there, done that about 7 years ago, and we couldn't find a place.
Yeah, so we discussed this. The point being is that when that was scoped, I believe that it was over scoped in order to keep the bison playing. This is to just talk about how we can keep the provision of skating going so that we can continue the longevity in terms of children sport and development, really. So it might not necessarily need an Olympic size ice pad to try and continue that. But yeah, noted. Thank you. We've also had a couple of work programme suggestions. The first two were from Councillor Compton Burnett on the reviewing documentation. I had a chat with officers yesterday, Councillor Compton Burnett, and the suggestion is that we go for a task and finish group to do that review of the documentation to make sure that it all matches up throughout. I'll open it up to you, as I know that you're leading on the leisure park one as well, but I'm recommending that it goes to a task and finish. Is that sufficient? And if so, is there anybody that would be willing to take that on?
Thank you. Yes, it would be great to go to a task and finish group. I would love to lead it if I had the time, but I don't. If there isn't anyone willing to lead a task and finish group, the most important thing, I think, is to go through the new strategies and compare them against the previous action plans, because I think some of the actions in the 2015 to 2022 plans weren't picked up, even though they hadn't been completed. So the most important thing is just to check that all those actions that we promised have been picked up and transferred into the new strategy. And if we have time to make sure everything's aligned, that would be fantastic. But don't worry if we don't.
Yeah, and I think that's the point of it going to a task and finish. I don't think it's a best place to sit in a committee to go line by line to see whether actions have been met. That's really, a great use of a task and finish group. I guess we can put it out to the rest of council members and see whether anybody wants to lead on it, and to ask for any membership of that, and we'll take it from there. And then the last one was from Councillor Howard Sorrell. Again, spoke to officers yesterday on, I'm trying to remember let me try and find the work programme request itself. It's to do with SLAs with housing partners. We've got housing partners coming to scrutiny next week, I believe. Is that right, Councillor Miller?
Exactly. And thank you, Chair. When I went through this, I think you must have been peeking at what's going on at scrutiny next week. We've got the two main housing providers in before the committee, and that's exactly what we're talking about. It is a general thing across. We've got more than 20 housing associations in Basingstoke and Dean. The two principal ones occupy 80% of the tenants, so it's appropriate we're addressing it to both Vivid and to Sovereign. But it's across the board. We're addressing issues across the board. I've got about 3 of these in my own ward where we both live. Exactly the same kind of problems, but it's going to be addressed at a general level. And that's precisely, I'm willing to take the content of this suggestion to meld it in, and I can make sure it's melded into the conversation next week.
Yeah, and obviously if you want to turn up, the agenda should be out by now, if not soon. Yeah, so have a look at that, and if you've got time to come down and make any comments or complaints, then do so. Councillor Miller again.
Yeah, just very, very briefly, we are not taking individual cases. I stress the overall issue. We know that there are problems. It's getting an idea of what the housing association landscape is, and then it's what their constraints are in terms of finances and everything else. But this is an ideal subject to be bringing up.
Yeah, 2 seconds. Sorry, Councillor Simon. Just on that, if you do have any individual cases, I've been reliably informed. Rachel Wilson is the Strategic Housing Association liaison lead, who is the best placed to take those individual complaints. I can pass it on afterwards and let you know the details so that you can go through those individual complaints. Councillor Slimin.
Could I just ask of the Chair of Scrutiny whether you're going to be considering any questions that might ask about how they deal with private individuals who are not housing association tenants but are affected by what the housing association do or do not do, which then affects their property.
May I, Chair? What we're trying to do is look at the housing associations. If there's an associated question about their impact on the existing community at a general level, I see no problem with that at all. Because it's all to do with communities. It's as simple as that.
Thank you, Chair. I might try and come. Thank you. And ask a question.
Yeah, I was going to suggest if you've got anything specific, do go along. I know it'll be welcomed. Any other than work programme suggestions? Councillor Golding, you look like you're going to say something.
I have one, but Ellie sent me the form, so it'll come for next time.
Excellent, because I was going to direct you to a form anyway, so which is what Ellie says that I have to do. Councillor Miller.
On the forms, I was searching for one of those. Ellie has kindly put it on the councillor, what do they call it? The knowledge page. It is now there for all councillors to access, because I couldn't find it either.
Thank you very much. Anything else then, if we're all happy? If not, thank you very much for coming, and good luck to everyone or anyone up for election this year, and see you soon.